In this video, we're diving into economic surplus, a key concept that measures the benefits markets generate for society. We'll start with consumer surplus, the extra value consumers get when they pay less than they're willing to. Then we'll explore producer surplus. This is the profit producers gain when they sell above their minimum cost. Finally, we'll combine these to understand economic surplus. That's the total net benefit of market transactions. By the end, you'll know how to measure these surpluses and see why they're essential for analyzing market efficiency. Now, if we use that efficiency criterion to maximize economic surplus, what is economic surplus and how do we find it? All right, we want to focus on the buyers, or in this case, the consumers, right? The demand side. And so consumer surplus, that extra economic surplus that's going to be going to the consumers, that'll be the marginal benefit that they get from consuming that unit minus the price they pay to get that, the cost, right? So the marginal benefit will be the marginal benefit side, and the price is going to be the marginal cost side, the difference between marginal benefit and marginal cost. Okay, that's going to go to consumers. Then we have the producer surplus. Right? This is going to be the benefit that the producers get, the sellers. They get to keep the price that they sell the unit for. And then they have to subtract off their marginal cost. So we'll have that difference there. So the price might be something like they sell it for $100 and that only costs them $10 to produce it. And so then it's going to be a producer surplus of $90, that difference between 100 and 10. Same thing for consumer surplus. Maybe the marginal benefit of buying this unit is $200 and it's only going to cost them $100 to buy it, the price. And so they have extra surplus there, benefit over the cost to purchase it. So 200 minus 100, they'll have a consumer surplus of 100. Now we can add these two together. The consumer surplus plus the producer surplus together will be the total economic surplus of the entire exchange. And we can rewrite these real quick. Consumer surplus is that marginal benefit minus price. Producer surplus is price minus marginal benefit. We can do a little bit of algebra here. We can cancel out these prices. This is a plus price and a minus price. And so then we're left with, one way to think about economic surplus is the marginal benefit to the consumer minus the marginal cost to the producer of actually buying it. And so this is going to be the total economic surplus of a transaction to society as a whole. And we can take that total surplus to society and we can split it up into how much goes to the consumer, the buyer, and how much goes to the producer, the seller. We want to be able to measure consumer surplus when we're looking at a supply and demand graph. That means we have our price axis on the y-axis, our quantity axis on the x-axis, and we'll have a demand curve here because we're talking about consumer surplus. And we read consumer surplus from the demand curve because we know that the height of the demand curve is also willingness to pay and is also the marginal benefit of a particular unit on that demand curve. Okay. So let's put prices up here. This price will be $120. Let's just say the price is $50 in the market. Like so. Okay. All right, so the market price is $50. We have a demand curve here for, it could be an individual person. It could also be for a market as a whole. And let's do this as 200 units for our quantity. Okay, so let's first talk about the consumer surplus for an individual unit. So what I'm talking about is, so for this unit here, let's say that's 150th unit. So that marginal unit there. We want the marginal benefit is the height of the demand curve. And so that first dot on the demand curve, it would be equal to $80, okay? We want to subtract off the marginal cost of buying that good to the consumer, and so that's going to be the price. And so for that individual good unit, for the 150th unit, that vertical distance will be the consumer surplus for that single unit. So we'll have that vertical distance there. And so that difference would be 80 minus $50 or $30 for that single unit. So now imagine we did that for every single unit, marginal unit. and we added it all up, that would give us the consumer surplus for all 200 units, or the consumer surplus for the market. And so if we did that for all those individual units, we would get a triangle, an area that looks like that for our consumer surplus. That yellow triangle. Right. That's the entire area beneath the demand curve, but above the price. Right? So we want that entire area beneath demand, above price. There's our consumer surplus up into the quantity 200, the units that are actually sold in the market. Okay. All right. So if we wanted to calculate then a number for the consumer surplus for the entire market, we need the area of this yellow triangle. So to remind you, the area of a triangle will be 1/2 times the base times the height of that triangle. The base times the height, this part here, this is just a square, base times height. And so a triangle is a square split in half. Okay, that's where that half comes from. So if we want the consumer surplus area for that yellow triangle, the base here will be from this point to this point, from 0 to 200. So we'll have 200 minus 0 times the height. The height goes from 120 down to 50. So we'll have 120 minus 50. And now we're doing some arithmetic. Put it into your calculator. We got 1/2 times 200 times 70. And so that's going to be equal to 7,000. So the consumer surplus for that entire market, the yellow area, would be equal to $7,000. Okay, practice. This is how a question might look to you on an exam. I have a supply and demand for Beyond Meat burgers. We have quantity on the x-axis, price on the y-axis. The price of a burger is $2. The consumer surplus will equal what? So I'm looking for a number here. The price here is $2. Here's our price line. And if the price is $2, then consumers will purchase 300 units. So using our definition of consumer surplus, you can get this area on the graph. It'll be everything below demand, marginal benefit, above price, that marginal cost. And so all this yellow areas are consumer surplus, everything extra going extra benefit going to the consumers above the price they have to pay. So we have all the numbers we need on this graph to calculate our consumer surplus, 1/2 base times height of that yellow triangle. Our base is going to go from 0 out to 300, and so we have 300 for our base. Our height goes from 350 down to 2, and so we'll get 350 minus $2. Again, plug that into your calculator. It's a simple arithmetic, and we'll get 150 times $1.50. And that will equal $225 for this question. Another exam type question might be about the change in consumer surplus if the price changes. And so here we have the price decreases from $2 to $1.50. Consumer surplus will go do what? Increase or decrease. And so we started with $2. That's the one we just started or just calculated. That would be this area here. Right? Everything below demand and above that price of $2. Now, if the price goes down to $1.50, right, then we'd have that yellow triangle, that consumer surplus is still there, but then we'd add in this green area as well, right? So that the whole colored area would be the new consumer surplus if the price goes down to $1.50, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that lower prices are going to be increasing the consumer surplus. And consumers like lower prices for two reasons. They'd be saving, getting more surplus on every single unit that they were consuming before, up to 300. And now they actually get some surplus from these new units that they get to sell from 300 to 400. So I'll leave you to practice to figure out what is the consumer surplus of that big triangle at $1.50.